Hiya, 10. I hope you're all well. It looks like most of you did really well on the quiz that I set for yesterday, so that's really good. You've got some good knowledge about the Holderness Coast already. So far, what you've done is you've watched a video, like a documentary about the Holderness Coast, and I will put the link to that on again this week so that if you didn't watch it or you've forgotten it, you can have another look. I think it was about 14 minutes long. And I also did my videos in my garden, sort of with the chalk on the patio and the mini whiteboards, explaining to you some of the processes and some of the reasons why the Holderness Coast is one of the most rapidly eroding coastlines in the world and the most rapidly eroding coastline in Europe. So we're leading up to writing this up, and I know because some of you have emailed me that some of you have already written quite a lot of this up, and that's fabulous. But it is a really important case study. So some of the stuff I'm going to go through, you might have already written notes on, but some of you might want to go back and make more notes and so on. So the learning objectives basically are to understand the causes of the rapid coastal erosion, which we have really covered in quite a lot of detail. So we'll just do a little recap of that. The second learning objective is to understand the impact that the erosion has on the economy, society, and the environment, and then to understand the ways in which the coastline has been managed. So it's very similar to any other case study you've done. You've got the causes, the effects or the impacts, and the strategies or the responses. So this particular video is more focused on the effects, the impacts, and the previous lessons we did before half term were more focused on the causes. And then our next lesson will be more focused on the management. And I'll explain how to write it up. And then you will have a couple of lessons free to write it up. And again, some of you may have spent more time writing it up already, and that just means you've got a bit more freedom next week. Okay. First of all, drop everything and read. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about the Holderness Coast. And if you want to print, want to print off the pages that I've put on Show My Homework, that would be fab. But if not, don't worry. Okay, can erosion on the Holderness Coast be stopped? Coastal erosion can certainly be prevented, but at a cost. Who should pay? The cost of coastal protection is often controversial. Most people want their own stretch of coast protected, but do not always see why their taxes should pay to protect someone else's. Until the 1990s, it was usual for local councils to tackle erosion by designing hard engineering structures. Most are expensive, so now more soft engineering techniques are used. But which, if any, work best? So hard engineering are basically built structures, so things like sea walls, like we have at Sidmouth, the offshore breakwaters, and soft engineering is working with the natural processes. So it might be adding more sand to the beach, for example. So most of what we'll talk about in the Holderness is actually hard engineering. Hard engineering techniques at Holderness. Wooden groins at Hornsea. Coastal resorts usually have one agenda: protect the beach. At Hornsea, wooden groins have been built to trap sediment carried by longshore drift. These keep the beach in place at Hornsea, and in turn this protects both the cliffs and the town. Advancing waves or swash have to travel further over the beach, and the friction caused absorbs much of their energy. Less energy results in less erosion. So basically, groins are there to trap the sediment. They make the beach bigger, and if you've got a bigger beach, less erosion takes place on the cliff because the sand or the pebbles are absorbing the energy first. However, what happens in one place almost always affects other places. South of Hornsea, the village of Mappleton was being starved of the sediment trapped by Hornsea's groins. While longshore drift continued to remove the sediment from Mappleton's beach, none of it was being replaced. Rapid wave attack eroded the cliffs, so much that by the 1990s, nearly 4 metres of cliff a year were being eroded, and the village was in danger of disappearing completely. So Mappleton was the village I talked about in my previous video, and it was also on the 14-minute video on YouTube I gave you a link to as well. So the problems at Mappleton happened because Hornsey had put these wooden groins in place. But Hornsey wanted the wooden groins because otherwise they'd lose their coastal resort, their caravan sites and so on. Okay, rock groins at Mappleton. After a campaign by residents and local councillors to protect Mappleton, Humberside Council built 2 rock groins in 1991, costing £2 million. These consist of boulders of Norwegian granite laid out like groins. Like those at Hornsey, their aim is to prevent the removal of beach sand by longshore drift, and so reduce cliff erosion. The cliff face was also regraded or shaped to make it less steep and more stable. So in other words, it was sort of made more diagonal, if that makes sense, so less steep, so big chunks wouldn't fall into the sea as easily. It's not difficult to predict the impact of the rock groins at Mappleton. At Cowden, 3 kilometres south of Mappleton's rock groins, sediment starvation has caused increased erosion of the cliffs. This ripple effect, where erosion increases just past the last groin, is called terminal groin syndrome, which we talked about in a previous lesson, and happens wherever groins trap beach material and starve other areas. The village of Cowden has seen its erosion rate increase from an average of 2.5 metres a year to 3.8 metres a year between 1991 and 2007. Revetments at Easington. A rock revetment has been built to protect Easington's gas terminal. So again, Easington, remember, provides 25% of the UK's gas when it's in full swing, and revetments are basically these diagonal sea walls that you can see, and you've got riprap in front of them, which are the big boulders. Okay. What I would like you to do for this task is print the sheet if you can. The sheet is separate on Show My Homework, so you can go back and do this afterwards if you want to. Basically, you've got 5 key paragraphs, because don't forget, in an exam, you need to make your points, explain your points or develop them, and provide evidence to back them up. So in column 1, you've got different points. In column 2, you've got the explanation. And in column 3, you've got the evidence. Okay, so what you need to do is write those out in order in 5 to make 5p paragraphs. If you print the sheet, you could colour code it, you could number it. You don't have to write it all out if you're a bit of a slower writer, but some people might actually find writing it all out is better. Okay, so have a go at that, and I'll go through the answers to that in our next lesson probably, but have a go. It's fairly straightforward. You just match up the point to the explanation to the evidence that supports it. Okay, remember in a case study, you always need to know where the case study is. So this is my lovely chalk diagram on my patio of the Holderness Coast. So you'll see at the north of the Holderness Coast, you've got Flamborough Head, all the way down to Spurn Point in the south, Mappleton sort of halfway along. All of you should have, and I know that most of you have drawn a little sketch of the map of Holderness and described where it's located. So it's located on the northeast coast of England, and it's got a North Sea coast. Another map which gives a little bit more detail about some of the places. So Bridlington is the furthest north, the kind of town that's to the north nearest to Flamborough Head, and is quite protected from Flamborough Head from the big waves and so on. Then you've got Barmston, which is a village where they're losing their land pretty rapidly. There's a lot of caravan sites and things in Barmston. Hornsey is the one I just read about. So again, it's a big caravan. There's lots of caravan sites, a big sort of tourist destination. Mappleton's the village that really suffered when Hornsey built all of its sea defences. So then in 1991, Mappleton built sea defences for itself. The area between Mappleton and Aldborough, there are lots of farms and small settlements which have all really suffered from terminal groin syndrome. Sewell's Farm, for example, was one of them. And then further down, you've got places like Withensea and Easington, which is near there as well, which are also having their own problems. So Easington is right down towards Spurn Point. And then you've got Spurn Point at the bottom, in the southernmost tip of the Holderness Coast. Next activity is, again, this sheet is separate on Show My Homework, so you can print it out. And we do this sort of thing quite a lot. So this is the impacts of the coastal erosion. So what impacts is this coastal erosion having on the people? So the social impacts, remember they're the people's lives, the economic impacts, which is the money and jobs, and the environmental impacts as well. So first thing that I want you to do is colour code social, economic, environmental. Some of you I know will think of some of the statements actually relate to more than one of those classifications, and that's fine. But make sure you think it through and colour code it and then stick it into your book if you can. If you can't print it, then you might just want to write them out from the sheet online or something. The extension task, for those of you that are aiming for a grade 6 or higher, is which of these are direct effects of the erosion and which are effects of the attempts to manage the erosion. So which of these are actually directly related to the erosion itself and which of them are more related to the way people have tried to stop the erosion? Which of the effects do you think is worst and why? So if you can do that, even if you're not target grade 6 or higher, that would be really good. What would be a brilliant thing to do as part of your write-up is to draw a Venn diagram like this. We often do this as a spider diagram where you just colour code social, environmental and economic, but you could do it as a Venn diagram and place some of those statements in the relevant part of the diagram. So some of the statements might be social and environmental, and you would place them in the little bit, the overlapping bit between social and environmental, for example. Up to you if you want to do that. Some of you might prefer just to do it as a mind map with social, economic, environmental. Some of you might prefer to do it as a table. Any way is absolutely fine. And that's really all I want you to do in this lesson as part of your write-up. And then in our next lesson, which will, in my class, be tomorrow, I'll explain more about the management of the Holderness Coast for that bit of the write-up. So you will have then got information about where Holderness is, information about the causes of the erosion, which most of you did before half term, information about the impacts of the erosion, and then tomorrow, the management.